A single drop. Once upon a time in a vast and endless desert, there stood a small cactus named Pico. The desert stretched far beyond the horizon, filled with golden sands and towering dunes shaped by the wind. The sun blazed fiercely in the sky every day, and at night, the stars sparkled like diamonds. But despite the desert's beauty, it was a lonely and quiet place. For many years rain had not fallen. The ground was hard and cracked, and most plants had withered away. The animals that once played in the shade had long since left in search of greener lands. Only Pico remained, standing tall but alone in the middle of the desert. Every morning Pico looked up at the clear, endless sky, hoping to see dark rain clouds. "Maybe today will be the day rain comes," Pico whispered to himself. But each day the sky remained bright and cloudless. The wind whispered gently through the dunes, as if offering comfort, but the desert stayed dry and empty. As the years passed, Pico's hope began to fade. "Perhaps the desert will never bloom again," he thought sadly. "Perhaps I will stand here alone forever." But deep inside, Pico still dreamed. He dreamed of a desert filled with blooming flowers of every color, tall trees providing shade, and streams of water flowing gently across the sand. He imagined birds singing, animals playing, and the wind carrying the scent of fresh blossoms. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold, pink, and purple, Pico noticed something unusual. A small fluffy cloud drifted across the sky. It wasn't large like the rain clouds Pico had always hoped for. It was tiny and looked fragile, almost like it didn't belong in the vast sky. Pico sighed. Such a small cloud. It could never bring enough rain to change this desert. But then, something unexpected happened. From the little cloud, a single drop of water fell. It sparkled in the fading sunlight, glistening like a precious gem. Pico watched in awe as the drop fell slowly, twisting and turning through the warm air, until it landed softly on the dry ground right beside him. For a moment there was silence. The drop disappeared into the cracked earth. Pico stared at the spot where it had fallen. "Just one drop," Pico said softly. "The desert is so big and the ground is so dry. What difference can a single drop make?" To Pico's surprise, a soft, gentle voice replied. It seemed to come from the drop itself, though it had already soaked into the soil. "A single drop may seem small," the voice whispered, "but even the greatest rivers begin with a single drop. Change always starts with something small." Pico listened carefully. The voice sounded wise and kind, but he still wondered, could such a tiny drop really make a difference? Days passed. The sun rose and set. The stars filled the night sky, and the wind continued to whisper through the dunes. Pico kept watching the spot where the single drop had fallen. Then one bright morning something incredible happened. Right where the drop had touched the earth, a tiny green sprout appeared. It was small, barely more than a blade of grass, but it was alive. The first sign of new life in the desert for many years. "A sprout!" Pico exclaimed with joy. "It's growing!" The sprout reached toward the sky, its tiny leaves trembling in the breeze. Pico watched over it, shielding it from the harsh winds and celebrating every new leaf it grew. It was a small sign of hope, but Pico felt that maybe the drop had been right after all. As more days passed, something even more surprising occurred. Other small clouds began to appear in the sky. Some were tiny like the first one, and others were larger. One by one they drifted over the desert. and from each cloud a few drops of rain fell, sometimes just one or two, sometimes more. The drops landed in different places across the desert. Wherever they touched the ground, tiny green sprouts began to appear. Slowly the desert started to change. The dry, cracked earth softened. Grasses pushed through the sand. Bright flowers in shades of red, yellow, and blue bloomed, filling the air with sweet scents. Birds returned, singing cheerful songs as they flew from flower to flower. Small animals came back too, rabbits, foxes, and turtles, all playing among the grasses and resting in the shade of newly grown bushes. Streams of water trickled through the desert, reflecting the blue sky above. And in the very heart of this blossoming paradise stood Pico, no longer lonely, surrounded by beauty and life. Pico smiled, remembering the first tiny cloud and the single drop of water that had started everything. It all began with just one drop, Pico whispered. One small drop that believed change was possible. The desert, once silent and dry, was now a place full of laughter, music, and life. The wind still whispered through the dunes, but now it carried the scent of flowers and the sound of birdsong. And so the desert had bloomed, all because of a single drop. Moral of the story: even the smallest effort can lead to great change. Every river begins with a single drop of water. Every big journey starts with one small step. Never underestimate what you can achieve. Even the smallest action can make a difference in the world.